He made history when he was elected the first Korean American to serve in the U.S. Senate.
And New Jersey Senator Andy Kim joining us now to discuss a number of topics from the wildfires in South Jersey to the state of the Democratic leadership in Washington.
Senator, great to have you here in person on the couch.
Thanks for having me this morning.
I want to begin with the wildfires. We know that a 19-year-old was now arrested, charged with arson. You actually visited that area, took a tour. Can you tell us about some of the damage to the businesses and the area overall? And I know that there were no homes impacted, but what did you see?
Yeah, well, look, what I saw was widespread destruction. I mean, 15,000 acres being contained, now 50% contained as of last night. I just want to start by saying, like, we should all be thankful for the heroes that are doing this, the firefighters, the first responders that have been stepping up. As you said, no homes lost, no lives lost at this point. So really incredible in that way. But, I saw, just burnt out trees up and down the parkway. It got so close to some of the homes. Many homes were evacuated, including some of my own staff from my Senate office had to evacuate. So this was very personal for a lot of us. And, we're going to continue to pray, as well as make sure we're doing everything that we can to keep people safe.
I mean, like you mentioned, there were no homes damaged, but there is damage. And are there federal dollars in place to help?
Yeah, there was a lot of damage, especially, in the Pinelands. I did see just a few structures, businesses that buildings got burnt up and destroyed. We're still looking into whether or not the federal support can be there. I'm ready to engage, but I'm really taking my cues from the experts on the ground in terms of what they see in terms of the scale of the problem. But as someone on the Homeland Security Committee, I'm ready to go to try to make sure that my state gets what it needs.
Okay, good. And you had a busy day yesterday because you also made a surprise visit to the Elizabeth Detention Center, and that's important because that is where Karim Daoud, an Egyptian native, was detained over a month ago. During a regular meeting with ICE about his immigration status. Now, ICE is saying that he was arrested for a violation with U.S. immigration laws, but there's not much known about why exactly he was arrested. What do you know about it, and what did you discuss about it with him?
Well, what I know is what ICE told me, which is that he does not have a criminal history.
Yeah.
And, this is someone who's been in this country 21 years, has a U.S. citizen wife, has 2 kids born here, U.S. citizens, and no criminal background, no violent background. Works as a restaurant owner.
So what was he arrested for?
I don't know all the ins and outs, but it was certainly. I mean, look, I think all of us are in agreement. Violent criminals, people who've done, really damaging, scary things. Yes, that's what should be prioritized. But to go after someone like Karim, who again, ICE told me directly that he has no criminal background and no criminal history. And so, he's been there over 40 days. I was talking to him face to face yesterday, and he's just telling me heartbreaking stories about, seeing his little kids and uncertain, when he's going to be able to be with them again. And, this is his country. After 21 years being here, built a family here, built a business here. And it's just like, I really truly believe the American people know that that's not what we should be focused on. If we're going to kind of move in on this, like I said, let's focus in on violent criminals and others. But this is just heartbreaking here. And it's just something that I found just tough to watch him, really emotional, just saying he's trying to keep up hope right now. And he's asking why is the government doing this? Why is it focused on people like him?
And probably very fearful that he could be deported. I mean, this is all a part of a larger conversation of what the Trump administration is doing in their handling of immigration. Even here closer to home, the implementation of putting ICE agents in Rikers Island. Where do you stand on all of these issues and how the Trump administration is handling this?
Yeah, look, I mean, this is something where we've just seen completely going overboard in terms of how this is approached. Like I said, I think there's wide consensus across our country that we need to make sure that we're addressing immigration when it comes to violent criminals. We don't want people in our country that are committing these crimes and taking those types of actions. And, if that's where the focus was, I think that there would be a greater understanding about that. But very clearly, especially within just the first few weeks of this administration, the fact that they're going after people like Karim and others, it shows that that's not their priority. And, I think that that's why you see, Americans really starting to lose faith in what this president's doing when it comes to immigration. It seems like there are widespread abuses of their power. very much cutting out the judiciary branch now and not obeying the laws that are out there, regardless of what they believe. They have to follow the laws.
So what can you do then as a senator, right? We're hearing from a number of folks who are fearful to just walk out their door, send their kids to school because they're worried that they're going to be stopped, much like Karim was, and questioned and then brought in. So what can you do as a senator to urge communities and folks who are still applying for immigration status that they are safe?
Yeah, look, first and foremost, like what I did yesterday, showing up unannounced to the detention center, making sure I can get a sense of how the treatment is there. My office has a very robust constituent service operation where we're responding to cases, also trying to get ahead of that, informing people of their rights, helping them understand, what are their rights if they have an encounter, what are the different things that they need to be thinking through, just so that they understand the law, that they understand what is afforded to people in this country as we're supposed to have due process, which again, we see the Trump administration often overstepping and abusing in that type of way. So, I'm going to continue to stand up for my constituents, all over 9 million of them. And, New Jersey, one of the most diverse states in the country. I'm a son of immigrants married to an immigrant. This is very important to all of us.
Well, last time you were here, you talked about, before you were elected, you talked about how important it was to make sure that you could keep down the cost of living in New Jersey. Now we're dealing with tariffs. We're also dealing with congestion pricing that could or could not be pulled off or shut down. What are you doing right now, then, to handle both those avenues to make sure that New Jerseyans aren't having to pay more and more?
I'm really glad you raised this because, again, these are the types of things that we had wide consensus across America that we want to have a government that's focused on lowering costs. And the president made that kind of statement during the campaign. Not only is he not doing it, he's making things worse. These tariffs have been raising prices, especially on small businesses. And that's where I put a lot of focus on trying to help save the small businesses, because we know the billionaires like Elon Musk and the tech companies, they're getting carve-outs from these tariffs because of their, kickbacks and support to the president. But, who's looking out for the small businesses? Who's looking out for these businesses that have razor-thin margins? So those are the types of things I'm trying to address.
What can you do about it?
Yeah, so what I'm doing right now is I'm mobilizing a coalition of small businesses to be able to speak out against these tariffs, to be able to not only have their voices heard down at the Capitol, but to engage here in the state of New Jersey in terms of what kind of support they're going to need going forward, because right now they're being harmed. The Trump administration is talking about some support for farmers. Well, they should also be thinking about support for small businesses. But first and foremost, he should just reverse course. He reversed course some of the way when it comes to the tariffs, because he saw how economically devastating this is to our country. So many families, they're losing their 401k savings, their retirement savings. People are very worried about this. The other thing I'll just say is I'm about to head back down to D.C. because this Republican leadership and majority in Congress is trying to gut Medicaid right now, $880 billion in cuts. That affects 2 million people in my state are on Medicaid, 1 out of every 3 kids. And it's not just about those on Medicaid. I had hospital system leaders come to me just the other day say that if Medicaid is gutted, their hospitals may very well close. That's in New Jersey. Let alone the rural hospitals all over the country. So this is going to affect all of our care. It's going to make things much more expensive. It's going to hurt our budgets. It's going to put a lot of strain. And I hope people see that across the political spectrum. They see the dangers there.
Keep us posted on all those things. And it's really important, too. I was speaking to a number of folks who are even just talking about, and this isn't meant to sound silly, but they're worried about just going to simply the Jersey Shore for vacation in the summer. What people would do as a cost-cutting measure not to go somewhere else, they're worried if they go to the Jersey Shore that just the cost of playing a game may have to go up because of some things, right? Which brings me to the question of what is the best shore in New Jersey?
Dan.
What's your favorite boardwalk?
What's your favorite shore town?
Yeah, look, I love all of the shore.
I represent such an answer.
No, I'll give you the. My family right now, we love going down to Brigantine. We got little kids, 7-year-old and 9-year-old, and that shore there stays shallow for a long way out, so I don't have to worry as much in terms of whether or not they're going to get swept out. But I love it up and down, and that's exactly what we want to make sure. But we're seeing potential reductions in tourism right now to the United States because of all the chaos. We have to change course.
All right.
Senator Kim, thanks so much for crossing the Hudson to visit us in person this morning.
I want to go to the Jersey Shore with you, and we're going to do one of these games. We're
Let's
going to see
do
which
it.
one we can squirt the water gun into the balloon.
You'll see my skills.
Okay, here we go. Senator Kim, great to have you.